Yeah, perfect. It's saved on private, so it's like it's just to myself
No
the
problem.
recording.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
and first of all, I'd like to thank you and like let you know that all the information and interviews they're gonna be reserved to me and my supervisors. It's gonna be just us that are gonna evaluate the data. And uh, first of all, I'd like to know you a little bit more, Natalie. We have talked to each other already, but I want to know a little bit more. What's your role? What's your background? What's your experience? How's your team? So I want to know a little bit more of you.
Of course. So I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at Macquarie University. So my remit includes pretty much everything to do with commercial third-party vendor arrangements that the university enters into. And that's approximately $500 million of spend every year. So we do a lot of stuff to support the functioning of the university. So it is indeed a support function. So we're a service function. We pride ourselves on delivering service and to the needs of our customers, but we're also subject matter experts in commercial negotiations, legal, probity, and these sort of things. So the way the team is constructed, it's a fairly large team, but compared to other universities is very small. So there is 14 of us as compared, for example, Sydney's Uni 50. So we are very we're large in terms of what we do, but we're small in terms of being commercially focused. So
Uh-huh.
the way the team is designed is I've got four direct reports who are senior managers. Three of them are individual contributors and they manage portfolio of vendors in a certain broad category. So they're very
Uh-huh.
broad categories. So as I said, we're commercial and legal specialists. We're not necessarily subject matter experts in any particular discipline because the university runs so many disciplines, you can't possibly find or you can possibly fund a team that will be a specialist in every single discipline. We buy everything from complex optical equipment to corpses for our medical research. So the way you, for example, Sydney University structures them, they actually try and find a lot of category specialists in small categories, and that's why their team is so big. But everybody runs their functions differently. So we operate more as an advisory and triage service, and then we execute a lot of projects via
Mhm.
the next team, which is led by a senior manager, and it has a small team of category specialists that are largely, and you would have met some of my team already, but they're largely brand new to procurement. So the way I've designed that particular team, it's entered into by graduates, and then they are um, delivering and growing through learning on the job. I came across a really powerful little YouTube video some time ago now, but I live by it. It's by a coach that coaches the Navy SEALs in the US Navy, one of the most high performing teams ever that you can imagine. They deal with life and death, right? So they had an axis of performance versus trust. And when they were talking about performance versus trust, the leaders that they aspire to have are not the high performers necessarily, but they're high on trust. So when they talk about performance versus trust, they talk about being in a battlefield and people being able to save your life. That's performance, like to save your life. And then on the trust level, they were talking about being people being trusted with their wives or money. So saving your life, trusting with life or money. And when they were talking about what kind of leader they would prefer, they dismiss the high performance, low trust and say, we don't want a leader such as this. And remember, saving your life. But we don't
Mhm.
want a person that we can't trust with other things, saving your life. You want a lower potential, obviously, you want a high performer in trust and in subject matter, but the preference would be for a lower performance and high trust. So That's how I develop my team. So trust, value base is number one, and then everything else is learnable.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's kind of to give you a philosophical approach. And
Uh-huh.
that aligns very well with how we've designed our framework, which is based on three fundamental principles of trust, empowerment, and accountability. So the accountability principle is really critical to our conversation, and we'll park that for the moment. But the way it works in the framework is uh, we trust our people, generally speaking, to do the right thing given the right tools. We empower our people, and I'm not talking my people, I'm talking broader university, because they are the subject matter experts in their fields. We empower them to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But the accountability principle, when you throw into the mix of trust and empowerment, is really important, because whilst we are accountable for the tools that we give, for the probity advice that we bring, they are accountable for their decisions. And I had this conversation at the outset when we first launched some years ago now, with very senior executives who would come to me and say, Natalie, you brought all these tools and tricks of the trade, and you're saying that you're making our life simpler, yet I have to make so many more steps in what I need to do when I need to spend my $5 million. Previously, I could just do whatever I want, and now you're telling me you need to do X, Y, Z. And my response to that, you don't need to do anything as long as you're accountable for your decisions. So if you want me to be accountable for the outcome, you use our tools, you use our expertise, and we come up together with the value for money within the probity rules outcome to your project, and everybody is happy. ICAC is not knocking on our doors. There is no corruption, there is no fraud, because we've followed a certain pattern. However, if you're comfortable that you can make that decision without me and without us, go for it. You paid more than me, but then you will be accountable for that outcome. And I will not be facing ICAC with you as I would should you be following the hopefully very good, simple process that we've designed for you. So that
Mm-hmm.
trust is fundamental to our function, and the trust is fundamental to the flexible working environment. So I think,
Uh-huh.
as far as the background is concerned, is probably enough for you to kind of understand from where we're coming from.
Uh-huh. You come from these 3 points. So accountability. What are the three?
So trust, empowerment, and accountability.
But
And,
trust
and,
and
and
power.
these are the stated principles in our framework. If you go and have a look at our framework on the first page, these are the stated principles, and they explained. So they explain what it means. So we haven't designed our tools to prevent fraud. It does prevent fraud automatically, but we don't want 27 signature on every piece of paper just because we want to pass that accountability. Accountability sits with one person. Responsibility may sit with multiple. Accountability with one. Accountability for the procurement function, the buck stops with me. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
happens in the function, it stops with me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
behind every single one of my staff members and behind the decisions that they make. And I will
Mm-hmm.
front ICAC, and I will front whoever I need to front for the decisions and for the tools that we present and for the way we operate in a flexible working environment. So I stand behind my team. Conversely, if people want to make their own decisions, they should stand by their decisions. So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of in a nutshell how we operate.
And did you have any kind of personal like conflict in terms of the person like okay they have the trust but unfortunately wasn't handling properly? Did you have any kind of tension as across the time?
Oh, just a little bit at the outset when people and you know that's an ongoing I guess challenge is probably too strong of a word, but people come and go, live, and the university and new people arrive. So you need to continuously build those links and bridges and relationships and establish that trust.
Uh-huh.
But generally speaking, once the concept is explained, people are very receptive, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to be accountable really for anything. So if Natalie says, you do this and I'll be accountable, people are very happy to pass that accountability to me and to my function. So I think from that point of view, it's functioning very, very well. And what we found through internal audits over the last couple of years, that the compliance is very, very high, practically 100%, because nobody is forcing anyone to do anything. We're not performing a policing function as such. We're just saying we're building you the tools and we're building the support structure for you to use. So if the outcome is delivered through that, we as a procurement function take accountability for that outcome. If you want to be on your own, it's your choice, because we're not a police function. We're not dictating for you how to do it. We build a policy, we build a framework. If you want to go and breach the policy, that's your prerogative. We're not going to police you on that. We will provide reporting to the management to say, that's gone outside of this and that. But so it's a positive reinforcement, if you wish.
And like, have you seen any kind of situation that, for example, you could see the productivity of the person that decreased, and then you needed to make like an adjustment, or like clarify something, or I don't know, like a one kind of, I can say negotiation, a kind of like negotiation with the person?
So if you are you talking internal or external? Are you talking my staff, or are you talking broader?
Your staff members
Well,
internally.
within the staff members, as I said, because the way the framework is designed is a set of tools that are available to people. So we adjust all the time. So if something doesn't work as a team, we decide, that template is too complex. Let's just redesign it a little bit. So since we launched in 2019, that's been almost 4 years now in September, we would have done hundreds of adjustments to the framework. And it could be as simple as, oh gosh, we've just found a spelling mistake, even though we do have proofreaders before we launch, and all sorts of kind of sets of eyes, to redesigning templates dramatically, merging steps, for example, for a lot of procurement. So the procurement framework is based, I can draw a parallel, which I often do when I do training sessions or town halls. Procurement is just shopping. It's a fancy word for shopping, right? So no matter what you buy, you go through 5 stages or five steps. The first step is your need assessment and financial approval. So imagine you're buying milk, right? So you need milk. So you stop and think, okay, do I really need milk? And you can stop at that step and say, no, I actually can survive without a milk. So that's your need assessment. But if you decided that, yes, I actually do need milk, you go through the financial approval. Do I have money to buy milk? No, actually, I don't have any money today, no cash, and they don't take credit cards at my corner store. I'm just going to survive without milk. Stopped at step 1. That's your step 1 in our process, needs assessment and financial approvals. Do I actually need to buy this thing or this service? And do I have a budget to do so? So we go through the process with the university delegates to explain to them. I'm a linguist by background, so I'm very particular about framing and about words. So all our templates are designed firstly to save time, very simple, and B, to tell a story. So they're not just random, write it up. They're very structured. And we have all sorts of hints in the background and examples. If people, we do little light bulbs in our templates. If you click on that light bulb, it actually takes you to an explanation what it means if you can't figure it out from the heading, and gives you an example how to write it up. So we have an example how to write a need, how to describe a need. We have an example how to seek and explain the funding bit. And if you know what to do, you just kind of fill it in. So that's your step number 1. So step number 2 in your milk example, it is called procurement planning. You're choosing what kind of milk to buy and where to buy it from, and how are you going to evaluate your quality of milk or quality of the supplier. Do I need oat milk, almond milk, light milk, full cream milk? Do I want to buy it from Coles, Aldi, corner store, support the indigenous supplier, make sure that nobody using, forced labor in the production of that milk? So you kind of go through that procurement planning, and it could be as simple as that, or it could be as complex as, you go through a market development and approach and all the rest of it. So that's your step 2, procurement planning. So you've decided, I want oat milk, I want to buy it from Aldi because it's just closer to the thing. But before I do that, let me just do the market research and check where it's cheaper. So I go online and see, can I buy it from somewhere? And you find out that it's actually better online by 15 cents, and you go and do that. So then the next one is your contract execution. And the milk example, you go buy, exchange money for services. That's your contract, and you're done. And then step 4 is, in our world, is executing your contract, giving the suppliers the courtesy of explanation why they won or didn't win, and destroying the document that you no longer need. So in any procurement, you follow these 5 steps. And when you give that milk example, or there are many other examples, then people understand what it means and why you need to go through those things. There is another very important step in our process, which is not strictly procurement, but it's really important. We do a pre-procurement risk assessment. And the pre-procurement risk assessment involves non-procurement risks. For example, somebody comes to us and says, can I please seek your help to buy, I don't know, diving equipment? And we will say, of course you can, but can we ask you a couple of questions? There is a form. For everything, there is a template. We've templated everything under the sun. And the template is asking questions, and we will help with the narrative as well. Where are you diving? And they may say, we're diving in the Gaza Strip. And that procurement could stop at that point, because Gaza Strip could be under sanctions and you can't go to Gaza Strip because the military, or Ukraine, or you know what I mean. How deep are you diving? Oh, 45 meters. What diving license do you have? Open water. You actually need to do, the other diving, like the advanced diving license, because open water only gives you 18 meters. We won't stop you from doing the procurement at that point, but we will say, okay, we'll start running the procurement, but in the meantime, you will need to demonstrate to your delegate that you've upgraded your license. And when we buy your diving equipment, you're actually capable of using it. So these kind of things, we help the university narrate around anything. And it could be, this is a simple example of a personal kind of a procurement where, our students in archaeology department do digs and they dive for, I want a job like that myself, but here I am supporting somebody doing that job. But, it could be reputational damage. It could be damage to health. It could be damage financial, PwC in the press. We're doing all sorts of things to protect our reputation with that sort of things, without necessarily articulating in the procurement that we're doing that because because we need to be very careful and not to be sued for things like, PwC saying, because of you, we've lost the business because you are doing this or that or the other. So that's just kind of a bit of a snippet on where our value comes into that. So all of the way our team is designed is, and it's a funny thing because it kind of contradicts a theory of time management and sitting in that need to do versus leadership versus procrastinating versus doing rubbish. But our motto is we never say no, in a way that when people come to us, we're very well networked within the university because of the nature of what we do. So people come to us with very random requests that have nothing to do with procurement, but we take upon ourselves to lead people through the university network to the right people or to the right solution, rather than, that's not procurement. And we build our reputation on that quite a lot. So that, yeah. But, time management is really critical. So, but to me, if I was to summarize, and I know that we've got another hour to go through the details of how it all works, but if I was to summarize why flexible works for us, and we've been flexible way before the university decided to be flexible, it's an outcome-based team. So if the outcomes are delivered, I actually have no issue whether people work 3 hours a day or 25. Well, actually, I don't want people to work 25, but I like lazy, efficient people, because if people can deliver to the expectation and deliver to the job that is designed as design, then I'm happy. And how people do it, obviously we are a service function, so that we're people facing. So when people need us, we're there.
Mhm.
So we look at flexibility as, I'll rephrase it. A lot of people at the university look at flexibility is, I work 2 days a week from home. That's my flexibility, and that's it. So if somebody needs me on the days I work from home, I'm not flexible to be flexible because that's my flexibility. So the way we look at it is we work however we work, and the teams, my little sub teams, they decide their own dynamics themselves. We come together every Tuesday. That's our kind of designated in the office day, so we can have those interactions. And then beyond that, the little sub teams decide how they work. The one thing that we always do, for example, I work from home generally every Wednesday. That's my designated day. I want to do my laundry during the week because I don't want to work in any shape or form on weekends, including laundry. So that's my work from home day. That's my thinking day. That's my paperwork day. I try not to take work on weekends unless I must, and things like that happen, and that's flexibility as well. But Wednesdays, for argument's sake, is my hub day where I do things at home, at work, do my paperwork, do other things. But if you need me on Wednesday and you're my customer, I'll be there. And nobody would even know that Wednesday is my work from home day. I won't say, oh, by the way, Wednesday is my work from home day. Can we do it on Thursday? People will never hear that from me. So, and that's what my team is encouraged to do, and I know that they do that as well. So they have their designated days. Maybe I don't even know, but they will never say to you, oh, can we reschedule for another day because I actually work from home on those days.
It's a flexibility of being flexible.
It's a true flexibility. And as I said, people do know that I work, people in my close circle know that I work from home on Wednesday. My boss probably doesn't. I don't know. I mean, he might. I don't know. But I would never say to anyone, I work from home on Wednesday, therefore, if we want a face-to-face meeting, let's meet on Monday. You would never
Uh,
hear that from me. You would never hear that from my team. We may internally, people know that I work from home. I like to work from home on Wednesday, so they typically wouldn't ask me for a face-to-face unless they have to. And that also goes to respect internally as well, because, it's good to have personal space.
you said that you have four teams, right? And four
I've
directors.
got, so I've got four individuals. I've got three senior managers who have no teams. They're just individual contributors. And
Who
then
are
I've
them?
three individual contributors at senior level, executive level, and then one executive who has a team. So I've got
Mhm.
four senior direct reports. One of them was a team of five.
Mm.
So three individual contributors, one with a team of five. And then I also have two more direct reports who are slightly lower level, but also fairly senior managers. And one of them is like an executive officer who does project work. One is an analyst. And both
Mhm.
of them have another direct report between the two of them, who is a boy Friday, who is so he's a casual student who we took on just to give him an opportunity to work. Bright guy, very cheap, gets some pocket
Uh-huh.
money and does whatever it is that they need in terms of data. He's got a specific scope actually, but pretty much a flexible. He works when he can, and he's given discrete tasks.
Uh-huh. Great, great. And let me know, how was the idea to come up with a framework? Like, you guys have a really well constructed framework. And how was the idea to start to build a framework in the beginning for the people to work remotely? And how was this evolution as well to have the framework that you guys have in the nowadays?
So it's a very good question. The Macquarie University is my third greenfield environment. So I delivered a procurement change at Energy Australia when I was the head of procurement there, and then Health Direct, which is two very different organizations. Energy Australia, obviously very heavy engineering, and Health Direct is a government procurement arm, if you wish, for very big health contract. So I delivered procurement change there. So Macquarie was my third one, but everyone was very different and very discreet. So with Macquarie, before I started building the framework and the team construct, I was pretty much by myself for almost a year. So I had another manager, Amanda Keegan, who you would probably be interviewing as well. So she was my second employee, and for about a year, it was just the two of us. Before I built the framework, I personally interviewed 209 individuals at Macquarie University. So I had 209 one-on-one interviews with everyone and anyone who would talk to me, from the vice chancellor to the executive deans to ops managers to academics to students to analysts to anyone and everyone who would talk to me. And then I started putting pen to paper, having understood what kind of moves the dial within the university. University is a very different environment from any other organization I've ever worked with. The needs are so broad and so varied that you cannot have one fits all approach. So you need to be truly flexible in how you're delivering anything and everything. And we've got a little WhatsApp group for my team, and it's got, I'll see if I can find it to show you. We've got a little, and it's an internal joke, so we would never share that with our customers. But there is a little, I don't know if you can see.
Procurement responding to what? Responding to
Responding to your poor procurement panic button, and it says responding to your poor planning since 1805. So we need to be flexible by design because we are responding to people's poor planning. So generally people come to us and say, oh my God, we need this contract yesterday because if we don't deliver, we'll lose the funding. So we jump into action and kind of, we can't do it yesterday, but give us 48 hours. So we're very flexible in there, but because we need to kind of do, and 48 hours is probably almost never happens, but we act as fast as we possibly, we react and act as fast as we possibly can. I would like to be in a position to be able to have a pipeline and a beautifully designed process where we say, the next year we need to execute 300 procurements. I've got 10 staff, easy peasy, 5 procurements per person. We're going to be fine. We're resourced. We've got a timeline because we've got templates for everything. We've got timeline for every type of procurement and what needs to happen. We understand the resourcing profiles and everything else. Never happens. In the ideal world, it will happen, never happens. So we are responding to poor planning of other people. And that's the nature of our work. So flexibility is our second name in how we operate. And I guess it helps us with the work from home environment as well, and the flexibility to the approach. Well.
Since the beginning was this framework that you guys are having now of having 2 days working definitely here?
No, we've never had 2 days or 3 days. It's almost comes naturally to us. So people feel that that's a good balance of thinking time, writing time, talking time, meeting with client times. So I personally mostly work 1 day a week from home, if at all. Sometimes I have weeks when I have to be in the office every day. But conversely, I think from the cultural level, I also encourage people, if they need to go to a dentist, not to take a half a day off, because they will pay back some other time when I need them to work on Friday evening. And that give and take I think is really important, but it also establishes that trust relationship.
That's great. That's great. And how do you show to your employees this relevance. You were saying, for example, that like you ask them to don't work to don't take like a half day leave. So how do you like clarify? How do you justify? How you explain the importance of them to don't do in this way?
It took a little while because people are always worried that they will commit fraud or somebody will perceive that they're not working hard enough. I think the ability to lean on each other when needed without fear that you are overstepping the boundaries. So boundaries are very important. If you have a look at my signature block, for example, it says at the bottom of it, I don't know if you've noticed, it says at the bottom of it that at Macquarie University, we support flexible work environment. While you may receive correspondence from me outside of your own working hours, do not expect an immediate response or action. And
Mm-hmm.
we live by that. So if I send something, and I encourage people not to read my emails when I said, I don't want to park them, but that again also requires discipline and trust. So I actually encourage people not to react to me immediately, but do it either during business hours or when it's convenient for them. And I don't panic when somebody responds to me at 2 o'clock in the morning because that might be convenient for them. I would ask, are you okay? Are you coping? But some people like to work like that. Some people have children. My team is actually quite unique. We don't have a lot of children, but we do have a person with a child, a refugee, and they've got other challenges. So I see that they, sometimes go, not sometimes, it's by agreement. They ask permission, and I said, you don't need to ask my permission to pick up your child at 3 o'clock. And I see that then they will, and I see the pattern because they would go pick up the child from school at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the afternoon, then they will do whatever the homework with the child, and then I can see them at 8 o'clock, presumably after they put them to bed, they start pushing stuff to me. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay because that's works for them, that works for me. The work gets done. What,
Uh-huh.
what else can I ask for?
And how do you measure data they task their productivity? How can you see that they are being productive as
Every role has a remit. Every role has an outcome-based approach. So if they're delivering to what it is that they're delivering, I have no issue. And I'll give you kind of a maybe a kind of a more holistic way of that, more theoretical way of that. If a person is not coping in their job, there is only two reasons for that. One reason is that they're not qualified to do the job and you need to upskill and get them doing the job. Or the other reason is the job is too big for one person and you need to rethink your structure. So if the job as designed by me or by the university, you need your key tasks are XYZ, you need to deliver weekly reports on this, you need to design and develop that, you need to work on projects as directed. If this is an example of a sourcing analyst role that has a child, if they deliver to me to these three pillars for me day in day out, I don't know. I don't mind when they're delivering them. Or if
Mhm.
we do have uh, this particular role, they've developed for me a bunch of metrics. So people put their projects in, so that our job is not dissimilar to you walk into how do you measure your department store sales, right? People come and go. You sometimes don't know how many customers you will have. So that we're not dissimilar. So we don't always have this visibility of how many projects we'll have at any given time. But what we do on a weekly basis, everybody's recording what they're working on. And if they have spare time, we always have process improvement activities, change management. So if somebody is in a lull, which rarely happens, then we've got other things that we do as a team, enhancements, improvements, development of future ways of working. Like Caitlin, for example, she's got this aspirational project where we will deliver a bot that when people are first contacting us, there will be like 3 or 4 questions that the bot will ask them in a very simple way. We don't want to become Qantas or Virgin with those, virtual assistants. It's just a really quick and an easy way to interact in the first interaction, so we know before we contact Diego as to what it is that you want from us. So that's her little project on the side that she's working with IT. So where she's got a lull, she kind of keeps working on that. I also have every team member, junior team member, aligned to a senior team member from a mentorship perspective. So the way the junior team is designed is to give them an opportunity to broaden their skills, both horizontally and vertically, to the extent that if you want to become a professional procurer, you can. If you want just to do something else, procurement is such a varied function that you can go in a very different direction from your first job. So if you want to become a lawyer, for example, you learn all of these skills through the procurement on how to read commercial contracts, how to negotiate, what probity means. So you've spent a couple of years with us, and then you can fly away and go into commercial law. Or if you like IT, we've got opportunities to teach a graduate or anyone who enters that job to become an IT project manager. So they will be given more tasks in that space, so they can develop their program management team skills and IT knowledge, and then fly away there, or become a commercial specialist in IT and procurement. So if you are an account or an aspiring accountant or finance manager, we will give you more tasks in that area. So then you can fly away and become a chartered accountant. So procurement is a really great base function to develop various and broad skills.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I want to understand that a little bit deeper. You say that like any task they have like their own thing to do, their own outcomes, you know, and of course like you measure in different ways once they are doing different tasks. And I want to understand specifically how is it, especially in terms of which sector. So how do this sector does it, and how I measure them. So I want to understand this a little bit better.
So the way our projects are varied and many. So they typically, probably 70% of the time of each individual is centered on executing procurement events, those step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 events. So at any given time, any individual will have a bunch of projects that are in different stages of that stepped process. So they every week they will go and update their KPI table that Lena, our sourcing analyst, administers and manages, and will say, I've got 3 projects in stage 1 where I'm working with the stakeholder on the development of a need, understanding the financial budget, blah, blah, blah. I've got 5 projects in stage 2, which is the heaviest part of what we do, because that's the most time consuming. We write up the procurement documents, we write up the requirements, we send it to market, we evaluate, we manage stakeholders in evaluating, we do the assessment. So they will say, I've got 3 projects in step 1, 5 projects in step 2, and whatever in which stage. So we can understand their workload and whether they need help or whether they are under. Then every 2 weeks we have a team meeting where we go through that and kind of look at who is where and whether anybody needs any help. And then in addition to that, Sergey is my new manager. He's only been in the job for about a month. He's super experienced. I'm extremely excited to have him because I've never had a person of that experience in managing a procurement team. So I've never really had a 2IC. So now I'm hoping to have a 2IC. So he, I assume, will be managing his junior team much more closely to give them more opportunities to being nurtured and to give them more procurement knowledge, because I'm spread a little bit thin. Because whilst my primary goal and my primary purpose for my role is to build and lead a high-performing team, I get pulled into urgent things because we are designed to push that panic button, helping your poor planning since 1805. So I get pulled too much into that stuff where I need, and our framework is designed as a very flexible framework. And it's an interesting conversation that I have every time with audit offices like New South Wales Audit Office audits us every year, and they ask, what do you do for procurements over 250,000 or over $2 million? And I wouldn't, I will be a little bit cynical if I say we're flexible on everything, but we are indeed flexible on almost everything. So, for example, if you've got a $2 million procurement for which theoretically you need to have a strategic type of documentation, but in this particular instance, this $2 million procurement is buying one thing that is available only from one vendor, and it's $2 million, take it or leave it. We're not going to go through like 27 different documents that are potentially required for a $2 million procurement under the New South Wales procurement rules. We're just going to say, okay, this is what we need. And the delegated authority decided that we indeed need it, because if we don't do it, grant money is going to go away and we won't be able to demonstrate ourselves as a leader in the field. Don't buy it. So the delegate signs, we do this, an executive memo versus those step documents, and off we go. Or I'll give you another extreme example where I am flexible is the wrong word. I'm actually not flexible, because previously what used to happen is procurement wasn't a function until I joined, but say CFO, who managed procurement as a sign-off person, any single source would need to be signed by the by whoever was the delegate at the time. It was the CFO. Now it's myself. So one day I receive an SMS, well, not SMS. I open my phone after hours, and there is a single source procurement seeking my approval for 30 million. And I thought, no, it must be Vietnamese wong. I'll look at it tomorrow. So I'll look at it tomorrow on my computer, and it's indeed $30 million. And what they were seeking is my sole source approval for a building, the university medical school building, for the project where the ground has already been broken and they started building, and they were seeking retrospectively my approval for a single source of a builder. Wow. So I refused to sign, and I said, okay, what happens if I say no, I'm not signing it? Are you going to stop the building process? You're not, because who am I to tell you to not do it? If you genuinely needed procurement approval, you should have thought about it before you awarded that contract. But I'm assuming that somebody's gone to someone, to the vice chancellor, to the council. It's a $30 million thing. The delegate is actually finance and facilities committees. Why? So I kind of, from that point of view, so I've taught the university not to come to me retrospectively. I will not sign anything retrospectively. If somebody comes to us retrospectively, we say, okay, the deed has been done. We can't undo that deed, but let's document it and say, we've done that. We acknowledge that we haven't followed the process. However, no wrongdoing has been done. There's no conflict of interest. Dear Vice Chancellor, please acknowledge that happened. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how we work in terms of the subject. But what you are, your subject of your interest is flexible work environment. So I think it works hand in hand. Flexibility in approach to flexibility how we deliver.
And do you feel that there is a kind of like, I imagine you are talking about like that you settle the meetings, you have said about how the people settle the meetings. I want to understand how do you feel about the engagement of your team in terms of when you have like online meetings or when you are having like personal meetings?
We're big fans of personal meetings. In the personal meeting, you can exert much more authority. And we present ourselves as authorities in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So I put my team, every single one of them, recently through a NADA, which is National Institute of Dramatic Arts, presentation skills training, led by directors and actors. And we arm even junior people with little tricks of the trade, how to exert authority, because the young people with very little um, positional authority, if you wish. So, for example, in a evaluation meeting, one type of the evaluation, one type of the meeting that most of the junior members will be leading is the evaluation consensus meeting. So basically, you've got a group of senior people, sometimes executive deans, who are evaluating a proposal from a vendor. Could be on a very serious matter, how to position Macquarie University as strategic institution better. Like you've got hardcore evaluators and hardcore vendors, and you've got a 25-year-old evaluating a consensus meeting. And a consensus meeting's objective is to basically, for every evaluator, and it could be, as I said, as senior as the executive dean or even above, general counsel and other people, executives and academics who are a very interesting bunch. You want one of those, so you're an interesting bunch because you are such bright, intelligent people, generally speaking, but with very firm and firm ideas and thoughts. And I'll give you another example from a hospital in a moment. So the young people, 25-year-old graduate student, all of a sudden find herself at the helm of a meeting where she's coordinating people with years standing in their profession and senior people as well on 10 times the salary sometimes, to come to a consensus. Not an easy task for anyone, let alone a grad student. Very hard to do on Zoom, much easier to do in person. So the way you would, firstly, I always ask people to stand up and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of raise above. You can't raise above in a Zoom meeting, but you can when you are in a meeting in person. You raise above and you're already higher than the rest, and that kind of perceived authority is there. So that's kind of one of the tricks of the trade. And it's not easy, but people are learning, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the only way. And they're learning on the job. I'm not a fan of Zoom for anything, and my apologies for having a Zoom today, but I didn't want to pass my viruses on to you more so than because it's not a good look. I encourage people to actually stay at home and take days off. Oh, I mean, I'm functioning. I just have a blocked nose. Otherwise, I don't like people when people come in and kind of soldier on, because that's just false economy. Then the rest of the team gets sick and you have no one.
Yeah. No,
So,
no, no problem. And
I know that I get distracted in Zooms myself. Typically, if it's a one-on-one, it's another story. But if I'm in a big Zoom, I do other things, and I'm very upfront about it. I've got three screens. I've got three things happening. I look at my messages. I do stuff. I write up, and sometimes I get embarrassed when people ask me a question. I have no idea what they're talking about. I cannot keep myself on Zoom unless it's a subject that is I'm really deeply involved in. If I'm just in the meeting, forget it. I retain 3% of the meeting, if that.
yeah, you were talking about the sense of power that you feel that is that is important to have during the meeting. So why do you feel that this is important, and why do you feel that having meetings in person you can
It's not,
work
it's not, it's not power. Power is probably the wrong word. It's authority.
authority?
There's a very big distinction between power and authority. There is positional power. There is subject matter power. This is a little bit different. It's an authority. So they see you as an authority to be able to facilitate that particular thing. And they listen to you because you're armed with certain tools to bring that consensus in a particular example that we talked about. And I'll give you an example which I will kind of briefly refer to a minute ago from the hospital, where I was brought in as an authority to resolve a conflict where we had a bunch of very, very senior doctors arguing with very senior bureaucrats at the university because they couldn't come up with a consensus on a piece of equipment. There were budget restrictions versus medical objectives and things like that. So I was brought in to facilitate that discussion, and I prepared for the discussion by firstly having one-on-one meetings with a senior neurosurgeon and helping him build their story versus the budget story from the bureaucrats. And when you come armed with this sort of things, it's much easier because you actually know what you're talking about. In that particular instance, what went pear-shaped and where we had to start from scratch is the both parties, when they were designing the evaluation criteria, were very flippant about it, thinking, oh, the process will kind of happen and then we'll just do what we want. Both parties just kind of thought of that because that was historically how they've approached procurement. There's 3 vendors. The neurosurgeons wanted that particular vendor. The budget was with a different vendor because of the pricing. But the neurosurgeon said, oh, who cares? We know what we're talking about. So regardless of how the procurement process went, we just want Diego Campos to be our vendor, and we will dismiss any other outcomes. So our procurement evaluation process is very structured. It's formula-based. It's double-weighted, very hard to fudge the scores. The method spits out the ranking, and it's just pure maths. So you do your qualitative analysis, you assign your ratings, and then the maths do the thing. So when the maths did the thing in this particular procurement process, because they didn't do their due diligence, I would say, and agreed properly on what they were evaluating, the maths gave them the wrong outcome, that the one they didn't expect. And they said, no, we don't like it. We want a company that came like fifth. So we basically had to start the process from scratch and said, okay, guys, you actually need to agree what's important to you. And that's when I had those interviews. And I said to the neurosurgeon, okay, you want this particular equipment with this company. Talk to me. So I was kind of drawing out of him the story as to why. And he gave me a story which was really then very easily articulated into the requirements. He said, as a neurosurgeon, when I'm operating on my patient, if I don't have this, I can't remember the details, but for argument's sake, if I don't have this robotic arm, my neck goes pear-shaped and I can't operate for the next 5 weeks, because after standing over this patient without that robotic arm, which is only available from supplier X and not available from your other suppliers, then I'm out of work and not being able to deliver money to the hospital for 5 weeks. I'm not able to do surgeries for 5 weeks because my OHS without that robot. I'm like, that's your value story here and there. So that's your mandatory requirement, because you can actually translate into dollars the time that you spend not operating. And here's your value story. That's just one example where we help draw out of people why they need what they need, rather than, I'm not going to go with vendor B because I only want to go with vendor I. Just kind of getting under the hood of why. I don't know if you've ever been exposed to the Six Sigma methodology. So I've done it years ago when I was a young manager, and it was I was doing my MBA at Macquarie, and I worked for American Express at the time. And all of a sudden, this program for young managers was available to do Black Belt Six Sigma. And I thought, that sounds just so sexy, and it costs more than an MBA. I just want to do it. So I did my Black Belt Six Sigma, nearly killed myself because it was pretty hard, and I never really used it in my career life. But there were some really good principles that I've learned through it. And one of them is to ask a multiple why. Why? You know that fish bone where you draw a line and you ask why, because of this. And why is that? Because of that. And why is that? Because of that. And when you get to the bottom of that why, as in the example with the robotic arm, you solve a lot of anxiety.
And do you think that it's harder to do it like remotely? Do you think that in person
it's much harder to do it remotely? So we actually we try and do all of these sort of meetings in person.
For to be able to dig deeper in this.
Correct. So routine meetings is fun. And the university is very big on meetings, and that's not very productive, because to me, a meeting is being held to have a decision. If a meeting is a meeting for the sake of agreeing on another meeting, which is the majority of our meetings seem to be, then
Uh-huh.
to me, there's no need for a meeting. So unless the meeting um, is the objective of a meeting is to make a decision or to agree on something, that's a good meeting. And meetings like that are always better in person. When it's an exploratory meeting, yes. And again, Zoom to me, one-on-one Zooms are fine. Like I have a lot of one-on-one Zooms because you are concentrating on one another and you're having a dialogue and a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Three people is acceptable too, because usually it's kind of almost a dialogue between three people. More than three people, not a big fan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do you think that it impacts in the professional development of new employers and new employees?
Again, same thing. So people on Zoom cannot observe body language, cannot observe. Actually, conversely, what I say, yeah, and I haven't done that for a long time because for a long time I didn't need to. But when I was a young manager and I had sensitive conversations that I needed to have with someone, I was worried that my body language will betray me, and then I will take it via phone, so people can't see how I'm reacting, and I could put my video off, so just to regroup and kind of stop hyperventilating. I don't do that anymore because I don't really need to. But in a situation, if something like that, I would be worried about that my body language will betray me. I will
Uh-huh.
prefer to do it on a Zoom so people can't read my body language.
Is it strategic?
It's very, and I've done that a couple of times when I had tensions with my bosses or tensions with other people, and I knew that I could not control. I've got a pretty reasonable poker face, but if it's deep and emotional, if it's affecting you on an emotional level, poker face, even with best poker players, doesn't work. So that will be the only time when my preferred method will be Zoom, or even a phone call.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So, like based on that, in terms of process, how can you say like positive and negative aspects of having online of having this remote contact and personal contact? Like you have said, some positive aspects of remote and personal.
Remotes are very good for quick check-ins. So, for example, I don't mind at all having remote one-on-ones. Like we've got routine one-on-ones where we just check in. Sometimes they're 5 minutes, sometimes they're booked for half an hour every week with every one of my direct reports.
Mhm.
Sometimes they are shorter, and it depends on where people are. We always have a Zoom link or my office. And if we're both in the office, we have it in the office, or go for a coffee or go for a walk, depends. But there's always a Zoom link. If for whatever reason I'm usually in the office, but if people are working elsewhere, then we just have a quick Zoom. And it could be as quick as 5 minutes, nothing to report, everything is under control, these three things are happening, off we go. Or it could be a half an hour when we need to extend and then potentially meet in person. They're check-ins, they're not decision meeting. That how are you going? What's happening? Do you need me for anything? Can you do this thing? Can you look at that? That type of thing. So that's not a decision meeting. I will not have as a general rule, until there's no other way, a decision meeting on Zoom.
Mhm, 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 mhm. You do you do any kind of like social activities for the people to interact, for your team to interact with each other? How do you do it?
All the time. So there were a couple of, I'll give you a couple of things. So firstly, I've got a very structured program which the team absolutely loves, and it started last year. I decided to have a 3-day workshop over a period of time to develop the team's credo, vision, and mission. And we engaged a very experienced coach that works with the university and has worked with the university for quite some time to do that. And it was such a successful workshop that our marketing said that they'd pay $1 million to develop the outcome that we've achieved in those 3 sessions as a team. and will shortly appear on our website. So we're just building our new website where our credo and mission and vision that the team developed themselves will appear. That I decided to develop a program with that same coach that will last us a year. So every month we have a day of site, which it's in person with the coach, and we usually have it on our city campus in Sydney CBD, where we have a structured program around self-development. So it's a leadership program centered on development of you as a leader. And there are 4 modules, and each module has 3 sessions. So we've got 12 sessions over a year where we talk about, ability to influence, how to manage conflict, how to time manage, how to raise above the line and not work below the line, how to navigate the quadrant of need to do versus leading. And even if you're an individual contributor, you're also a leader in your discipline. So we've got that as a team activity, and we usually have a team lunch, and sometimes we have a team dinner. I host my team at my home at least twice a year, just as a social interaction. So we've had one just recently for the 4th of July, kind of themed dinner at my house, at my home. And then I usually will host Christmas as well. Um, we also celebrate birthdays and things like that. So the one
Uh,
thing that was quite funny, and it'll kind of be interesting for your research, I'm sure. So Sergey, who is my new experience manager, took over a junior manager who was under my mentorship, and this role was designed as an executive role, but I had this aspiring manager, absolutely brilliant girl who progressed from a graduate to a coordinator to a manager of a team, but she was operating under my mentorship. And because she was so new to people management, she was really great. And she got a massive promotion outside of Macquarie University, for which I take a little bit of credit as well. So, but having said that, she took sometimes instructions very literally, and this is a very important point for your research, I guess. So one day, a fairly senior manager from another area came to me and said, "Natalie, I was there yesterday at Procurite desk, and there was not a single person there on the floor. You should be servicing customers better and having always a person on the floor." So I went to Carolina and said, "Carolina, what do you do? How do you work? How do you guys work? We need to make sure that we are kind of more accessible." And so she instructed the team without consulting me that at any given time there will be 2 people in the office sitting, waiting for customers to come in. So they worked like that for, I don't know how long, maybe 3 months. And I was on holidays, and I had another manager babysitting that team because Carolina left. So while I was on holidays, Amanda took over that team, and they, not a complaining way, they said, "This doesn't really work for us because we never see each other as a team." So they never meet because at any given time, 2 people are in the office and 3 are at home, and they never, as a team of 5, see each other. So they don't learn from each other. They don't bounce ideas from each other. So then I called the team and I said, "I hear that this feedback, talk to me." And they said exactly what I've just said. We never see each other. We never bounce off each other. We never socially interact with each other, which is part of our pleasure. And then I said, "How many people dropped in the last 3 months?" And they said, "None," into the team. So then I went to that manager who complained and I said, "We acted on your complaint. Have you, since that instance, have you ever dropped in to see the team? And do you ever need to drop in and see the team?" And they said, "No, but it's a matter of fairness. My people need to be in the office 3-2, and your people do what they please." And I said, "That's my team. I have a laptop." So they now work however they work, but on 2 days, the 5 of them come together usually. And then on other days, it's random.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
Do you think do you feel that in the now moment, this moment, you found that I can say the perfect framework, the perfect decision?
yeah, so that was a perfect decision because, but what I've also as a compromise, so that was not all, because as I kind of started looking at it, I had a look at their signature blocks, and they're not entitled um, to work phones, to the paid mobiles, and because they work from home, they don't have a phone number on their signature block. And I said to them, okay, guys, flexibility goes both ways. You're not entitled to a phone. However, if you want to work flexibly, I request that you put your personal mobile number on your signature block. Then this way, you're always contactable by phone as well as by thing. If that doesn't work for you, then you need to be at your desk with the desk phone being available 24 whatever 7 hours a day, and they were very happy to do that, and everybody just quickly added, and they hardly ever get calls, but we need to be available. And then Sherry is working on also, you may have seen them at shared services. They've got like big banners for various things, so I've asked Sherry to develop a big banner that will be um, position in front of the team. If we're not here, do this, that, and the other. So people like upfront, they came, they're no one, but there's a big banner to say you can contact this way, that way.
Uh-huh. It's a good one. It's a good one. And like talking more personally, like do I do you, how many people do you live with?
In terms of at home,
Yeah,
I live with my husband.
just you and your husband. And how do
Correct.
you he works like in a flexible work framework as well?
He does, but he mostly works from the office. So he's a scientist essentially. He's an academic. So he works for the National Measurement Institute. So he works in labs. So he's a manager, a senior executive, but he also is a scientist at heart. So he works in labs a lot. And his direct reports are all scientists and they work in labs. So he very rarely works from home. He works from
Uh-huh.
home when he needs to rather than like he needs thinking time or he needs something, but so we don't. And we live in a big house, so we live between, at the moment I'm in the city apartment, but we also have a fairly big house, so if he needs to work from home, we've got two separate studies. In the apartment we don't, but in the house we've got separate studies that are set up. In the apartment I'm the only one who has got three screens, and everything else he just kind of hot desks when he needs to work in the apartment. But in the house, we have very well set up two studies because
Uh-huh.
we had children. They just left home, so we still have our family home.
And how do you manage the interaction? Of course, like it's not so common that both of you are at home, as I can imagine it. But how do you manage the interaction to each other during the time that
It's,
you are working from
you
home?
know, sometimes we don't even see each other because my office is on the low floor. His office is on the other floor, and yeah, sometimes during lunchtime I'll have my Zooms, and I don't eat normally during lunch because my uh, I spike down when I eat. So I don't normally have lunch because if I have lunch, I slump. So I eat breakfast and then I eat kind of early dinner and I just snack a little bit. Because if I eat a full lunch, I just, oh, that's it, I'm done for the day. So he would prepare his own lunch. Normally I'm in charge of meals. But if we're working from home, both of us, and it doesn't happen very often, then he knows that he needs to make his own sandwiches because I'd want a sandwich if I see a sandwich, but then I can't work after I ate a sandwich. And he can't work if he doesn't eat a sandwich. So it's kind of different dynamics. So I usually just drink tea and snack on little nuts and chocolates and things when throughout the day just to keep me going. But if I have a meal, I just go to sleep during the day.
I'm gonna take this strategy. Maybe I need this as the same strategy because I feel the same thing.
Yeah. It's, you know how I'm a day person. You know, the people ask, "Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person?" I'm a day person. I get up like whatever 7:30, go for my walk. I've got a sleep disc, so I have to walk first thing in the morning to warm up my muscles, and then
Uh-huh.
and then I kind of start my day, whatever, I don't know, depends. Sometimes at 8, sometimes at 9:30, sometimes at 10, and then I work really well during the day.
Uh-huh.
Done. And then if I need to, and especially if my husband is overseas, he quite often goes overseas. I can pick up some work in the evening. I work really well when I'm by myself. When he's at home, I can't work in the evening because I get distracted and we watch a movie. But if I'm by myself, sometimes I've got an inspiration, and at 8 o'clock, I can just pull up my laptop and I do my best writing. But that doesn't happen very often. And I try not to work on weekends as a general rule. You need that.
Uh-huh.
You need that brain thing. We're also doing we were going to be launching our SharePoint site soon, and we're doing profiles on each of the people in the team so people know who we are. And I asked everyone to put like a little personal message at the bottom so people get to know us not just as professional. And my claim to fame is I have the lowest leave balance ever of anyone in the university. I take my leave and some. I usually take 8 weeks a year. That's my kind of stated thing. When I get a new job, and Macquarie is not an exception. I At the interview process, I say I take 8 weeks a year, um, and I do normally. So I take leave without pay. I need about 7 8 weeks a year of rest to function at my peak. So my
Mhm.
claim to fame is that I have the lowest leave balance, and that I consider that wasted time that you enjoy wasting is not a wasted time. It's actually added to your emotional bank account into
Mhm.
which you draw when the going gets tough. So I do all sorts of things which some people may consider wasteful time, including my husband. But you know, people. I was watching. I don't even know what it was, but it was something that came onto my feed randomly on Facebook where somebody was talking about consumerism and things like that. But the one interesting thing they said, and I don't necessarily subscribe to that entirely, but she said when you are down and you're buying a beautiful something for yourself, whatever tickles your fancy, it could be a dress for me, it could be a pair of boots for you, it could be, you know, a random piece of art for someone else. You're wasting money essentially to lift your mood. But in essence, you're not buying a piece of art or you're not buying a dress. You're buying a joy of that moment. And if you've got
Mhm.
disposable income to do that, there's nothing wrong with it because you're
Mhm.
not buying a thing, you're buying an emotion. And
Mhm.
I don't necessarily subscribe to that because consumerism is not good. But when it generally applies that we produce so much stuff, that's bad. But to
Uh-huh.
get a joy out of something, if you can, to me that's important. Well, that
Uh-huh.
goes for time. You know,
Uh-huh.
if you waste time and people perceive you as wasting time scrolling through your video reels, but you pick up knowledge along the way, which is random. To me, that's not wasted time. That's something from I get enjoyment of from.
Mhm.
But,
Uh-huh.
and it drives my husband nuts. But then I feed him all these random, interesting facts and things, and then I'm good at trivia, and I might, and it, you know, as they say, participation is highly overrated. It's all about winning, so we always win at trivia.
That's great. That's awesome. And talking about new employees, how do you handle the onboarding? How was it during the COVID? There was needed to be 100% remote, and now is in person. How do you handle the onboarding in general?
So and we've done quite. So firstly, I'm very picky about employment. So to me, that trust value base is really important. And I'll give you a quick example, which you need to keep quiet on your thing. Sergey is I'm Russian by background, and I'm very active in the Ukrainian movement in the war, anti-Putin, supporting refugees, and it's just a horrible thing. So when Sergey applied for this job, being Russian, I needed to establish his political views before I even considered him because I could not possibly work. with a person who would support the war and Russia. In
Mhm.
this regard, it's very personal for me, and I know all about the Anti-Discrimination Act and that you can't discriminate on the political grounds and things like that. But I went to the head of HR and I said, here's my dilemma. I can discriminate him on racial grounds and just not invite for an interview. But on paper, he's my best candidate. What do I do? Because I really want to interview him. But if I find out that he's that, I'm just not going to employ him. So all these sort of things. Anyway, to cut the long story short, we figured it out before we even interviewed him where his position was, very discreetly without asking any direct questions. Andrea was instrumental in helping me with that. And here we are. He's fantastic. So you establish that value base through the process. So usually when I interview, I do, when my team members interview as well, we do a pre-screen on the phone on Zoom quite deliberately, so we kind of get the gist of the person, and it's very very brief, 15-20 minutes. And I usually, having been in the game for quite some time, the first 3 to 5 minutes pretty much determine whether I could work with that person or not. Not always, but quite often. So that's the first thing. Then you go through the interview process, and I probe a person more so on the value base and trust and how they deal with people and situations versus their performance skills, because that is a highly teachable thing in procurement. You can learn just about everything and anything you need with a good framework within 6 months. That's why I'm so big on graduates, because they're bright, they're hungry, they're enthusiastic, they're very, very fast with technology. So when I take a graduate from school, they know nothing. They've never even heard a word procurement sometimes. And then you bring them in and you teach them, but you need to establish that value base. So once that value base is established, it's very easy to make people comfortable. I think that the key to success is from day one to make a person as part of the team and be comfortable within the team. So we try to do that. I don't know. It comes fairly naturally to me to as a good communicator, I guess.
And how do you think that working remotely can affect on it?
Um, I didn't induct a lot of people during. Actually, I can't. I'm just trying to think whether I even. I'll give you a slightly different example. So Ben Gray, who you would have met, he was inducted during COVID, and he wasn't part of my team. He's my peer, but I needed to develop a relationship. And in actual fact, Robin asked me to make him feel comfortable, because it's kind of a thing that comes fairly naturally to me. So Robin said, Natalie, can you take Ben under your wing and kind of make him feel part of the team? So we've developed a rapport on a one-on-one basis as colleagues, as I was kind of telling him who is who in the zoo and how people interact. The other thing that I did during COVID, which was super successful, and I don't even know how I came up with it. So we did a couple things. So the one thing which was much broader than my team, I've developed, we called it Steps Against Isolation. So we created a little spreadsheet where people recorded their steps that they did during the day to keep fit, and
Uh-huh.
also posted photos from their walks. So every day, and we had about 70 people participate from the university, not just my team, but 70 people from various walks of life, because we opened it to our stakeholders. It became really competitive. So every week we'll do a tally with a message, Sam did that. And if you didn't walk, we had a calculator for, if you bike, that is equals that many steps. If you're pregnant and pushing a pram. So we did all sorts of fun things that people did and translated into steps. So everybody was recording their steps, and at the end of the month, we had a monthly winner, and we send them presents, chocolates and little things. And every week, people will post photographs from their walks. And some people lived in the bush, some people lived in their apartments. So we stayed really connected through that. And it was just a really, really great thing. So when we came back to the office and I stopped, people like, oh, I said, I can't do it anymore because there was a lot of administration and things, but it was good fun. So we also had Zoom drop-in kind of drinking sessions every Friday, and and we had different ones. So we had team ones, and we had broader team ones, and we had IT ones. So common was IT, and was just a Zoom link, and people just would come in with their meal and food, and we just kind of chit chat and things like
Mhm.
that. So we stayed connected through a few methods like this. So that was not too, that steps against isolation was absolutely phenomenal for keeping people together. It became very competitive. It became really, and we had prizes for the best photo of the week, and became so competitive. It was just wonderful.
So I like to first of all thank you for that, for this conversation we had, and to see with you the possibility of me to participate for the next like meetings, just as a guest, just for me to see the interaction of the people in the meetings, and especially if there is one onboarding as well, for me to be together, for me to see the process. I don't know if you have for the next couple of months.
So there won't be any onboardings as such in the next couple of months. So we've got fairly stable team. So we've got one new role that Sergey is recruiting for, but it's likely to be an internal promotion. So it
Uh-huh.
won't be an external onboarding. So there won't be any external onboardings, but you're welcome to participate in our team meetings if you want. Are you speaking with Sergey?
I've spoken with him already.
Yeah. So he will probably grant you access to, he will have more meetings than I do. Uh,
Hmm.
but do you want to see our stakeholder meetings observed? You're welcome to.
Yeah, when is normally the stakeholders meetings?
It varies. So my diary is very unpredictable. So so we're going to have a workshop on modern slavery in the next month or so. If you want to attend that,
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. When it's gonna be?
Sherry Santos is coordinating the date, so that'll be probably about 15 people, and I will have help from Kylie McKinnon, who is our Chief Risk Officer, facilitating it. She's a brilliant facilitator, so I've wrote her in just to help me facilitate the people.
Hmm.
And essentially, as we touched on that before, is people meet for the sake of meetings and don't commit. So I, for my sins, chair the Modern Slavery Group, and I author Modern Slavery Statement for the university every year, and I really struggle getting action from people. So I wanted to hold a workshop, the outcome of which should be that people take, firstly, they will need to come prepared with thoughts on what they're going to do in their respective areas, and then
Uh-huh.
hold them to outcomes, because we need to start writing the new statement in a few months, and nobody's done anything.
Great, thank you. So I'm gonna send you. I can send you an email for asking for more updates of this workshop. It's gonna be a pleasure to attend.
Yeah, just
And
I mean, you're welcome to reach out to Sherry Santos, and ask her to tell her that I've given you permission to attend and ask to be included.
perfect. Well, the topic of the workshop is
Modern slavery actions, basically.
modern slavery reactions. Perfect. I'm gonna send her a message. Thank you for that, and also ask your permission for us to have a follow up conversation in the future as
Of
well.
course, no, totally. Happy
Okay.
to help.
Okay, so thank you, Natalie, for you give me your time. Like we had like one
Pleasure.
almost 1.5 hour. It was so great to have this long conversation with you. It was
My
so
pleasure.
important. So I've gotten a few insights that was really important. Thank you for that.
My pleasure. You're a very good interviewer, so well done.
Okay, thank you for that. Have a great day, Natalie.
You too. See you later.
Bye. See you later.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.